We will not allow ourselves to be coerced. That was Ulf Kristersson, Prime Minister of Sweden, speaking from Stockholm on Saturday, January 18, 2026, after Trump threatened 8 European nations with escalating tariffs, 10% immediately, 25% within months. And the crime? Defending Greenland's sovereignty. 27 European Union members convened emergency sessions. 8 NATO allies issued a unified condemnation. Thousands marched through Nuuk demanding "Stop Trump." And Mark Carney, fresh from securing billions in Doha, stood beside Denmark, declaring Canada's Arctic commitment. While Trump assumed threats would fracture alliances, Europe united stronger than ever. While Trump weaponized tariffs to seize territory, NATO reinforced collective Arctic defense. While Trump isolated America from allies, Carney's Qatar investments positioned Canada as Arctic infrastructure leader. The miscalculation is staggering. Trump's Greenland strategy just backfired catastrophically. Saturday, January 18, 2026, Truth Social platform. Donald Trump announced immediate 10% tariffs against 8 European countries: France, Germany, United Kingdom, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Netherlands, and Denmark. The stated reason: these nations deployed military personnel to Greenland for coordinated NATO exercises. Trump declared they were playing a very dangerous game, claimed safety, security, survival of planet, demanded American control of Greenland, threatened tariffs would escalate to 25% if European troops remained. The European response was immediate and unprecedented. Within 6 hours, all 27 EU member states scheduled emergency Sunday consultations. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen issued a statement emphasizing unity in support of and solidarity with Denmark and Greenland. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer declared Britain's position very clear: Greenland belongs to Denmark. And imposing tariffs on allies pursuing collective NATO security is completely wrong. But the most powerful rebuke came from 8 nations simultaneously: France, Germany, UK, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Netherlands, and Poland released a joint statement Sunday condemning Trump's tariffs as threatening a dangerous downward spiral that would undermine transatlantic relations. They affirmed full solidarity with Denmark and Greenland, emphasizing their commitment to enhancing Arctic security as a shared transatlantic interest. Swedish Prime Minister Kristersson initiated intensive diplomatic coordination with EU nations plus Norway and Britain to formulate unified resistance. His message was unambiguous: we will not allow ourselves to be coerced. Meanwhile, Mark Carney was in motion. Fresh from Doha, where he secured Qatar's significant strategic investments in Canadian Arctic infrastructure, Carney issued his own statement backing Denmark. Then he traveled to Copenhagen, then to Greenland. The symbolism was deliberate. Canada offers partnership while Trump threatens invasion. From Nuuk, capital of Greenland, thousands marched holding signs reading "Stop Trump." Greenlandic politicians collectively rejected American annexation. Prime Minister Mute Egede had stated days earlier, "We choose Denmark over the U.S." Trump's tariff ultimatum wasn't weakening resolve. It was galvanizing opposition. For decades, Arctic security operated on assumed American dominance. NATO's northern flank depended on U.S. naval power, U.S. surveillance systems, U.S. deterrence capabilities. European nations contributed, but Washington led. Greenland existed in strategic limbo, autonomous territory within Kingdom of Denmark, home to Thule Air Base, America's northernmost military installation. Geologically rich but economically dependent on Danish subsidies totaling approximately $600 million annually, Trump saw opportunity in that dependency. First in 2019, then again in 2025, Trump proposed purchasing Greenland. Both offers rejected, so Trump escalated to threats of military seizure. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stated explicitly, "Utilizing the U.S. military is always an option at the commander-in-chief's disposal." Trump warned nations that don't go along with his Greenland plans would face economic punishment. Denmark responded with quiet preparation. In October 2025, Danish Parliament approved second agreement on Arctic and North Atlantic. Massive investment in maritime patrol aircraft, Arctic naval vessels, air surveillance radar in East Greenland, drone acquisitions. Purpose: strengthen operational effectiveness in the region. Then, in January 2026, Denmark announced expanded military exercises in Greenland in coordination with NATO allies. The operation, designated Arctic End, involved aircraft, naval vessels, soldiers from multiple nations. Danish Defense Minister Troels Lund Poulsen explained, "Security in the Arctic is of crucial importance to the Kingdom of Denmark and our Arctic allies." The exercises would include guarding critical infrastructure, assisting local authorities, receiving Allied troops, deploying fighter aircraft, conducting naval operations. France, Germany, UK, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Netherlands sent small contingents to participate, not invasion forces, reconnaissance teams conducting pre-coordinated exercises. Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen had actually met with Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio the previous week, described it as constructive meeting, believed Washington understood the exercise's defensive nature. Then Trump announced the tariffs. Rasmussen stated the threat came as a surprise, given the positive tone of his recent U.S. meetings. European leaders were blindsided, but Trump had fundamentally misread the situation. He assumed threatening allies would force capitulation, assumed European nations would abandon Denmark to protect trade, assumed NATO solidarity was transactional. All assumptions proved catastrophically wrong. 8 nations threatened with tariffs, 10% immediate imposition, 27 EU member states convened emergency response. But these numbers tell only part of the story. The joint statement from 8 NATO allies represents something unprecedented in modern transatlantic relations. France, Germany, UK, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Netherlands, Poland, nations spanning different EU statuses, different Arctic interests, different historical relationships with the United States, all condemned Trump's tariffs in identical language simultaneously. That level of coordination doesn't happen organically. It requires diplomatic infrastructure, shared strategic assessment, commitment to collective response. The statement emphasized their full solidarity with Denmark and Greenland, declared the NATO exercise Arctic End addresses legitimate security needs and poses no threat to anyone, warned Trump's tariffs undermine transatlantic relations and risk a dangerous downward spiral. European Commission President von der Leyen reinforced this message. Her statement highlighted shared transatlantic interest in peace and security in the Arctic, emphasized the Danish-led exercise responds to need to strengthen Arctic security, concluded with explicit warning about readiness to defend ourselves against any form of coercion. Antonio Costa, President of the European Council, confirmed consultations with member states reconfirm our strong commitment to multiple principles: unity and solidarity with Denmark and Greenland, cooperation with NATO on Arctic security assessment, that tariffs undermine EU-US relations, readiness to counter coercion. UK Prime Minister Starmer's response demonstrates the coordination. Before issuing his statement, Starmer spoke with Danish PM Mette Frederiksen, von der Leyen, and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Only then did he speak with Trump. The sequencing was deliberate: European consultation before American engagement. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, typically Trump-friendly, acknowledged speaking with the president, but emphasized it is very important to avoid an escalation. Even allies uncomfortable with confrontation refused to endorse Trump's position, but the most strategic response came from Canada. Mark Carney had spent January 17th, 18th in Qatar, became first sitting Canadian Prime Minister to visit the Gulf state, secured commitment from Qatar Investment Authority with $525 billion in assets for significant strategic investments in Canadian projects. The focus areas: Arctic infrastructure, critical minerals, defense technologies, clean energy. Carney stated explicitly, Canada is significantly increasing Arctic security, strengthening our military and investing in critical infrastructure. Then Carney flew to Copenhagen, met with Danish leadership, issued statement declaring Canada supports the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity universally, including as they apply to Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark. Added that the future of Greenland is for Greenland and Denmark alone to determine. Then traveled to Greenland itself. Canada announced deploying small contingent of soldiers to Greenland for military exercises with NATO allies, not as invasion force, as demonstration of partnership, as signal that Canada defends Greenland's sovereignty. Carney stated, "Canada strongly believes that the future of Greenland will be determined by the people of Greenland in partnership with Denmark and no one else." Direct rebuke to Trump. Now connect the infrastructure pieces. Canadian Arctic Infrastructure Fund, $1 billion over 4 years. Port of Churchill expansion, upgrading Canada's only Arctic deepwater port serving 106,000 miles of coastline. Projects include all-weather road, upgraded rail line, new energy corridor, marine icebreaking capacity. Qatar's $525 billion sovereign wealth fund investing in these projects. Qatar already diversifying into Arctic energy interests as part of broader strategy beyond hydrocarbons. Denmark's Arctic investments, maritime patrol aircraft, Arctic naval vessels, air surveillance radar in East Greenland, drone capabilities, all designed to strengthen operational effectiveness in the region. NATO coordination, multiple nations contributing forces to Arctic End exercises, building interoperability for sustained Arctic presence. The pattern is unmistakable. Europe and Canada are building permanent Arctic defense infrastructure that functions collectively, with or without American participation. Trump's Greenland strategy relied on 3 foundational assumptions. Assumption 1, European allies prioritized trade over sovereignty. Wrong. 8 nations accepted tariff threats rather than abandon Denmark. Sweden's Kristersson, we will not allow ourselves to be coerced. Trade matters, but territorial integrity matters more. Assumption 2, NATO solidarity collapses under economic pressure. Wrong. Joint statement from 8 nations demonstrates collective defense isn't transactional. European Commission's commitment to defend ourselves against any form of coercion shows institutional resistance. Assumption 3, Greenland has no alternatives to American partnership. Wrong. Canada offers infrastructure, Qatar provides capital, European allies supply military cooperation, Denmark delivers economic support, Greenland no longer depends on American approval. What does United States lose? Arctic leadership within NATO. For the first time, major Arctic exercises proceed with explicit European-Canadian coordination, while U.S. faces tariff backlash. Denmark's Foreign Minister Rasmussen, what unites our nations is the consensus that NATO's role in the Arctic must be reinforced. Notice the language. Our nations, not under American command. Greenland's rare earth resources. Greenland holds 11 million metric tons of rare earth reserves, 370,000 metric tons of heavy rare earths, most valuable category, projected over 25% of future global dysprosium and neodymium demand. But extraction requires capital, infrastructure, expertise. Trump assumed military control would grant access. Completely wrong. Mining needs investment partnerships, processing facilities, transportation networks. Canada, Qatar, Denmark partnership now provides all 3. Canadian Arctic infrastructure connects Greenland to global markets through Port of Churchill. Qatari capital finances development. Danish military secures operations. European collective backing ensures political stability. U.S. completely bypassed. Transatlantic trust. Every European statement emphasizes dangerous downward spiral in relations. UK's Starmer calling tariffs on allies completely wrong. Von der Leyen warning about readiness to counter coercion. This isn't diplomatic rhetoric. This is fundamental reassessment of American reliability. Italian PM Meloni, typically Trump-friendly, emphasizing need to avoid escalation rather than endorsing U.S. position. Even sympathetic allies distancing themselves. Canadian Arctic positioning. Carney's timing was masterful, secured Qatar billions just as Trump threatened Europe, visited Denmark and Greenland, while European allies unified against Washington, positioned Canada as reliable Arctic partner in contrast to American chaos. From Greenland's perspective, the contrast is stark. Trump offers threats. Canada offers partnership. America demands annexation. Europe defends sovereignty. U.S. weaponizes trade. Qatar invests billions. The choice is obvious. Greenland's PM Egede already stated, we choose Denmark over the U.S. Thousands marching in Nuuk demanding stop Trump. Every Greenlandic politician rejecting American annexation. Trump has zero leverage. Infrastructure creates irreversible reality. Denmark's Arctic investments, maritime patrol aircraft, naval vessels, radar systems, drones operate for 30, 40 years. Once deployed, these capabilities cannot be uninstalled to appease Washington. They establish permanent Danish Greenlandic defense architecture. NATO Arctic End exercises set precedent. Once multiple European nations successfully conduct coordinated Arctic operations, that becomes standard procedure. Future exercises will build on this framework, normalizes European-led Arctic security without U.S. dominance. Canadian Arctic infrastructure, Port of Churchill expansion, all-weather roads, upgraded rail, energy corridors, ice-breaking capacity, functions for generations. Once Greenland's rare earths route through Canadian logistics networks, those supply chains persist for decades. Qatari financial integration. Qatar Investment Authority operates on institutional timelines. $525 billion sovereign wealth fund invests for long-term returns. Once Qatari capital finances Canadian Arctic projects linked to Greenland development, those relationships outlast any government. European diplomatic unity demonstrated this week creates template for future coordination. 8 nations issuing simultaneous condemnation. 27 EU members convening emergency consultations. This level of alignment doesn't dissolve after single crisis. It establishes institutional muscle memory for collective response. Greenland's Minister for Foreign Affairs, Vivan Motzfeldt, stated, "As part of the NATO alliance, it is a core priority for the government of Greenland that defense and security in and around Greenland are strengthened, and that this is achieved in close cooperation with our NATO allies." Notice the emphasis. In close cooperation with our NATO allies, plural, collective, distributed, not under American protection. Greenland explicitly choosing multilateral partnership over bilateral dependence. This isn't temporary response to Trump. This is permanent strategic realignment. Long after Trump leaves office, these structures will function. Port of Churchill will ship Greenland rare earths to European and Asian manufacturers. Qatari investment will finance Arctic energy development through Canadian partnerships. European militaries will conduct routine Arctic exercises with Greenlandic cooperation. Danish defense investments made in 2025-2026 will operate until 2060s. Infrastructure built now locks in geopolitical arrangements for generations. Trump assumed geography equals destiny, assumed Greenland's proximity to North America means American control, assumed allies have no alternatives to U.S. security umbrella. But geography is not destiny, infrastructure is destiny. And Europe-Canada-Qatar coalition just built infrastructure that functions regardless of American preferences. Trump cannot reverse this, cannot tariff it into submission. 8 European nations already rejected that coercion, cannot sanction participants, their NATO allies and Gulf partners, cannot militarily intervene. Attacking Greenland means attacking NATO member Denmark. Trump has zero leverage. From European perspective, this is validation of collective defense. NATO functions with or without American leadership. Arctic security proceeds through multilateral cooperation. From Greenland's perspective, this is confirmation of sovereignty, future determined by Greenland and Denmark alone. Economic development through partnerships, not annexation. From Canada's perspective, this is Arctic opportunity. Infrastructure investment positions Canada as gateway between Greenland and global markets. Qatar billions accelerate development. Leadership role while U.S. alienates allies. Carney's Qatar move flips Greenland power balance. Europe's unity blindsides Washington. And Arctic geopolitics permanently transformed. What do you think? Is Europe's unified resistance to Trump's Greenland demands a temporary alliance or the beginning of a permanent Arctic security framework that excludes American dominance?